I'm going to introduce a relaxation to begin, and then we're going to do a guided visualization. And I'm going to speak a moment about what that visualization is. And yeah, you may want to lower your phones for the duration of this period of time. Unbeknownst to us, we are living in a time where so much of our energy is being pulled in a lot of different directions, and we have these cords that are attached to conversations that took place in the last couple of days or even last couple of weeks, maybe with a parent, one of our parents, or maybe with our children, or something we've seen on a screen. There are so many different ways that our energy is being released out of us. And in order to come into a place of healing with such a significant conversation around money, we need to gather all those parts of us and feel reintegrated. So that's going to be the last portion of the meditation. So I'm going to ask you to sit in on your chair. Whether you use the back to lengthen your spine is absolutely fine, but make sure that your feet are equally weighted on the ground. Eyes can be gazing down at a 45-degree angle or closed, whatever feels right for you. Or if you want to sit in swastikasana, cross-legged seated position, I'm fine with that too. Whatever feels the most comfortable. The idea being that I want you to arrive. I want you to arrive in this room, in your chair, and in your breath. And just over the next couple of breaths, feel yourself settling in. And we're going to begin at the top of the head where the fontanelle is. And we're going to slowly release any tension that you may be experiencing in your scalp, where the hair follicles are. Imagine, if you will, that with each exhalation, you are releasing the tension. It is slowly melting down past your ears, your occiput, cascading down past your neck, cervical spine, all the way down until it reaches the tailbone, which is anchored in the chair, and let it go descend into the earth. Notice if your breath shifts just by the acknowledgement of the stress or the tension that's been let go of. The next step, we're going to move into the face on the skin of and notice whether we're holding any tension in the corners of the eyes, the corners of the mouth, the jaw, allowing the tongue to just move gently towards the back of the throat. And feel as though our face, which uses so many muscles to articulate our expression, just allow all those muscles to release. And our face becomes almost like a blank mask. And the tension moves down through the throat, the clavicles. It's like liquid light down across the breastbone, the solar plexus, pulls around the belly, down into the hips, over the quadriceps, slips down over the knees and into the soles of the feet. So all that tension from the top of the head is letting go. On your next exhalation, feeling into any tension in the throat, the back of the neck, and giving yourself permission to let it release down through the shoulder blades. And this time, we're going to move that energy that's finally being let go down through the upper arms, turning at the elbows, into the lower arms, wrists, hands, and then letting it release out of the fingertips. Now we move into the chest cavity and the upper back, the diaphragm, the solar plexus, where our breath resides. So allow yourself to experience the three-dimensional quality of the breath, giving yourself permission to let any tension in the ribs, the intercostal muscles, just let the tension go. Release into the belly. Release into the groins. Almost as though all that energy is weighting down towards the hips and into the sit bones that are anchored into the seat, and just imagine that it's all cascading down into the earth. And then finally, biggest muscles of our body, the quadriceps, the hamstrings. Release any tension in your legs that hold us up on this earth, working with gravity. Feel that release as it slowly cascades over the knees, down through the shins, the calves, the ankles, until it lets go through the soles of the feet. So at this point, using your mind's eye, I invite you to just notice without any judgment if there's any tension left anywhere in your body. And just notice that, what's so, but invite it to let go so that the physical body is in a state of total relaxation. Noticing the sounds of the rain, the temperature in the room, the shared space we are existing in. And on your next exhalation, I'm going to ask you to imagine that there's a cord attached from your tailbone down into the center of the earth. An energetic cord. It can be whatever diameter you feel is right, but the power of that cord is such that all the vertebrae above that connection are almost lightened and lifted because of the gravitational pull towards the center of the earth. Beautiful. Okay, it's time for our envisioning. I want you to imagine now that emanating from your shoulders, shoulder blades, are a pair of wings, powerful wings, about 3 feet in height and diameter. They are sparkling wings. They can be a color that really resonates with you, but the job that these wings have is of absolute power and significance. So they are almost, in my mind's eyes, like a dragonfly's. They are pulled taut to their full expansion, almost quivering with anticipation of what's about to occur. And they're horizontally opened, again, 3 feet out from your body. Over the next series of breaths, as you exhale, you are going to slowly draw these wings towards one another until they touch at the midline, and you will slowly coax and tease those parts of you that are consciously or unconsciously held outside of your body. at your own pace, and taking the time that you need, the wings begin to fill up with those parts of you to allow yourself to be fully integrated. And then when they touch, you'll bend at the elbows and you will slowly draw those elements back into your heart center, down through your spinal column, and all the way out through your grounding cord. And notice the concentratedness of you. The resonance of being fully intact, fully in your power. Just take a couple moments here to enjoy that sensation of full integration. And then when you're ready, and only when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and we can begin. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to give you a brief outline of where we're going and what we're going to be covering. I'll spend a few moments sharing with you who I am and how I got here. How can you trust me if you don't really know anything about me? Then I'm going to go into an explanation of how we arrived at our attitudes and beliefs, sometimes self-sabotaging behaviors around money, which really go back to our early childhood. At that point, I'm going to ask you to turn to somebody. If you're sitting next to someone you feel comfortable with, I would rather that the couple separate, because we're going to break off into a dyad, and we're going to share our earliest memory of money, and I'll talk more about that. Then we're going to come back together, and we're going to, some of you I will ask to share what that experience was, because it's been shown to me that there is an alchemy that occurs when you go back and you pull on that thread from childhood, and it weaves its way all the way through to the present day. As I said before, there are these filters that get dropped into place very early on that we don't question. The ego, wait, Joanne, stick with the outline. I'm really passionate about this, so I have to constantly be pulling myself back to where we're going. Thank you. At that point, we're going to that's all in the psychological, spiritual, emotional realm and the somatic realm of the body, because our body has so much innate intelligence. At that point, we're going to take a break. Whew. We're going to shake it off, we're going to have a snack, we're going to do a bathroom break, and then we're going to come back, and I am going to appear like a completely different human being in my left brain. And I'm going to ask you to join me in the analytical, in the discussion of risk, products, in the environment in which we find ourselves in, long-term planning, short-term planning, how to evaluate all the tools that we have within this three-dimensional world of money. And we will wrap up with me answering questions. There is someone that's coming soon, Vicki told me, and it's on the flyer, who's going to speak specifically about 529s and funding of private school education. So if you have questions, try and keep those for when he's here.
Mm-hmm. And that's December 4th.
December 4th? Okay. Oh boy, this is a little bit different. And I said to Vicki, and I want to say this now because I may forget this later on, I really would like, if you feel that this has been a worthwhile workshop, I would like you to spread the word, because I think that the consciousness needs to be raised around, as you've all shared, the understanding of what role money plays in our lives. And so the weather certainly probably deterred people from coming. I know it was a deterrent for me, but I said, no, I'm coming anyway. And so I would, if you feel that this is worthwhile, then please spread the word, because I would like to reschedule this after the holidays. Okay. So let's begin. I alluded to the fact that our relationship with money is one that dates back to when we were very young. Think about this. We all have children, right? Our children are like sponges. Based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we're very young, we are trying to figure out how to get fed, how to get shelter, and how to receive love. But then this insidious, almost like snake-like energy of money weaves its way through the dynamic of what we're experiencing. Whether we're growing up with parents or whether we're growing up with caregivers, there's always this emotion around, is there enough? What does it get spent on? Is it shared equally among the children in the family, or is there this sense of scarcity? Sometimes people share with me that they have these experiences where even though there's not enough, they would be taken out by their mother shopping, and they would come home, throw all the things that they purchased into the closet and hide it from the other partner, the husband, or maybe it was the reverse. There's so many lessons or beliefs that get put into place, as I said before, like a filter of a camera lens, that we don't understand that this is us growing up saying to ourselves, okay, that must be what money is in our culture or in my life or how I'm supposed to interact with it. And because it's so hard to talk about money with our friends and our partners, and it doesn't get talked about in schools, although I do come in, and if you would like me to, I would volunteer in the classroom, because I do this up at Rhinebeck, to help children get a handle on the meaning of money and the power it has over us, and then also the objective understanding of what credit card usage is and long-term savings and the power of all the stuff we're going to be discussing after our break. But it doesn't get called into question, and let's be honest, it's easier to talk about sex than it is about money. So here we are with these belief systems very tightly woven into our day-to-day life, and we begin to mature. Now, some of us, like me, I got a job as soon as I was able to. So then I was beginning to interact with money at the age of 14. Then some of us go on to college, some of us don't, but if we do, then we're taken out of our family of origin, put into a whole new culture, a whole new social environment. Where do we match up? Who are our friends? What school did we get into? When we have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, how do we deal with that whole situation of money? And I'm going to talk about how millennials, they're very different from where we are. And I have a certain respect for the way they're doing money in their relationships. But then we move on and we graduate, and then we go out into the career world. And then that relationship with money and how we view ourself, our sense of self-respect. If you are a practitioner or in business for yourself, how do you value yourself, bless you, in the world? Your sense of self-worth. Can I ask for a raise? Do I deserve to do this position? Or if you're a practitioner or a healer, how do I figure out what I can charge? It's fascinating when you think about the fact that we live in a world where something flavorless, tasteless, and odorless is not valued unless it's at a really high cost. What am I talking about? Vodka. Isn't that wild when you think about it? That something that's flavorless, tasteless, and odorless, it's only valued when you're paying a lot of money for that shot of vodka. And they do those taste tests, and all of them basically taste the same. It's our perception. So all of this gets factored in, and then, of course, we come into the coupling. Whether we're living under one roof, not married, or whether we are married and we have children, that whole dynamic of money sometimes gets totally replayed from what was going on early on in our childhood. So, for me, what I discovered as a financial planner, and I didn't share with you my early experience, but I did graduate from college, went on to become involved in the world of finance, became a certified financial planner, was successful, didn't necessarily like what I did, but I was successful, and I could not understand why I wasn't feeling a sense of gratification from that. Now, 20 years later, I can look back and say, oh, that was the missing piece, which is what I just shared with you, the soul's journey. I mean, I had clients who were making at that time, I have one client in particular that comes to mind, he was making $250,000 back in '85 as an attorney. And one day, and we had been working together for a few years, so I knew where he lived, I knew he was a family man, and I needed him to sign off on a disability insurance application form. And he said, I'm not going to be in the office on Saturday, can you come to the house? And I said, sure, Ira, no problem. So I drove in my car, it was out in Dover, New Jersey, and I got there, and I knew, I had that sense of, okay, it's going to be a mansion, check. It's going to be a Mercedes in the driveway, check. But here's what I didn't know and didn't expect. He opens the door, hey, Joanne, and I knew his wife and 2 boys were out at the baseball game. He said, come on in, I'll sign off on the forms. He opened the door, and the house was filled with crates. There was no furniture. So I was like, I know he's living here 3 years or more, because that's one of the questions on the form. But what was going on in his relationship with money, where he was spending so much on the outside, that on the inside, the home environment, the security, that grounding feeling. We walked over to a crate, he signed off on the application, it was as if it wasn't even happening. I left, he closed the door, and I walked away, and that was part of why my financial planning career was so disconnected. I didn't have the language, I didn't have the wisdom or the understanding of what to say to help someone out. So, the reason why we start this workshop with the underbelly, the emotional, the real belief around what money means in our lives is because the best laid plans that I could create would be sabotaged in certain instances by what people were doing and the suffering that people go through around their relationship with money. So, it doesn't necessarily have to cycle back to a specific memory of what was going on early on in childhood. I just want you to try and take a few breaths, feel what your body feels like as I'm asking you to step into those tender areas, and think about, what was your mother saying? What was your father saying? Or what were you talking about with your siblings at the time? Now, interesting point I will share with you. Most times you're going to go all the way back to a very tender age. But yesterday I had a new client come, and her story really revolved around being a teenager. When, because she and her mother were having such a hard time relating to one another, and she was in college at UC Berkeley, and her mother was the one who was able, her parents divorced when they were very young. Her mother was the one that was able to afford to send her to UC Berkeley. And because they were not getting along, she pulled the rug out underneath her and stopped paying for her college. She was literally out there with no net. I'm not going to take time now and explain to you how we were able to create that connection with where and how she's functioning in her life today. But trust me when I tell you that the work for her needs to be around that teenage experience of feeling as though who she was at that age was definitely not being mirrored or held or parented in such a way that there could be a healing, so that she didn't have to stop going to college, she didn't have to start taking out loans and finish at San Francisco State and go through her life literally fighting and combative. And and it was really interesting, and I'm getting a little bit ahead here, but the voice that begins to speak when you allow that inner child story to bubble up to the surface, you'll start noticing that he or she is actually talking in your present day life. So, we're going to take a couple of moments for you just to sit quietly and think about your earliest memory. I'm not going to hand that out yet. And then what I'd like you to do is pair off with a partner and share. I will time how long you have to share your earliest memory or the energy around what that felt like. Please, partner who's listening, don't interject. Allow them to process. You can ask questions after you feel like there's this sense of completion. And then we'll switch places and the other person will have an opportunity to go. Any questions for me at this moment? Okay, just take a couple minutes now and think about, being someone who believes so deeply in somatics, really notice your breath and allow it to be nice and full and really deep into the belly. Because the work that we're doing is much more profound than you may or may not recognize. And so I really want you to have a sense of compassion for what comes up and hold the space for the person who's sharing. And I want you to notice if you start to feel a tension or an ache, because a lot of these memories are residing still in our body. Okay? So the reason why this piece is so significant is because, and some of you may have done inner child work. I mean, if you've worked with a Jungian, that's a lot of the terrain that gets covered. But what's so fascinating is that the inner child is still very much alive and well and kicking inside of us. And I only work within the realm of money. I shouldn't say only, but that's the realm that I try and stay focused on. But one of you said before, and it's so true, it's about the money, but it has nothing to do with the money. So my sessions move into terrains that aren't necessarily related to the money. They have to do with the sense of self-worth, the balance of power in a relationship. It's very fascinating. I will also say that, interesting, I think I'm losing my train of thought. Thank you for sharing that piece about being in a place of abundance and not being able to recognize it and own it. Sometimes when people are living in a environment that is so much more than what their peer group is, there's a whole story that takes place about denying it or minimizing it or trying to feel like they fit in. And when we talk about the energy of money and what you're manifesting in your day-to-day life, I mean, I wish Teague, is that her name?
Tegan.
I wish Tegan, she were here, because what our thoughts are, they create our beliefs, which in turn feed into our actions and create our reality. And so what we believe is what we're projecting out into the world. And, quantum physics, particles attract one another that are similar. So if we're at that place or stage in our lives where we're not content with our relationship with money and we feel like we don't even want to interact with it, then there's going to be a mirroring outside of us of it's not flowing, there aren't opportunities available to us. I ask clients to actually, when I'm working with people who are trying to get a sense of being able to ask for what their true value is, it's almost like putting on a jacket 3 sizes too large. And you go out into the world and it's too big, but you have to step out there and say, this is what I'm worth. I've been charging these rates to you as a massage therapist, for example, for the last 4 years. Well, inflation's been running at 2% a year. You are actually losing money by not increasing your rates to be commensurate with what the market will allow. And what happens is that people come back and report that that coat that was originally too small they begin to fill it out. They begin to feel more easeful because they are received from the person that they're dealing with as, yes, this is what you really deserve. In the case of a salary situation, I had a nurse who came to me and she was saying, I've been at this hospital, I really love my job, but we can't make ends meet, we're always coming up short. And I said to her, I'm not suggesting that you leave your employment, but why don't you go out into the marketplace and just see what your value is out there. Put on the coat, create your resume and see. So she went out, and sure enough, she was offered a position at another hospital for $12,000 more. And she came back to the session, she said, great, now I have an opportunity to get a job that's going to provide $12,000 more income. I don't really want to take it. I said, well, then go back and present this to your existing employer. And sure enough, she came back and she said they met it. I assume, you know, because of the integrity of the work that I'm doing, that whoever chooses to work with me is going to be doing their career and or job at that high level. We're meeting on the same vibrational level. So it's not like someone's coming to me and they're doing a half-assed job. They're really working, and their purpose is true. So if you feel any resonance with the fact that maybe you're not getting what you deserve, then if you raise it up to that level that you really are actually worth, it's going to come back to you as, yes, you are worthy of that. So it's just interesting that you share about your early memory. On some level, there could have been this feeling of, I'm not really comfortable with where I am, and that there's this implied sense of coziness and security and warmth and intimacy that a small house can provide that a large house may not be able to afford. Who knows? It could have been something as simple as that. And I've heard that from adults of separated families, and we're living in a culture where that's very common, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done and healing that needs to be done on the piece of whoever you're living with feels like you are, to some extent, their financial security. Yeah. You are a commodity, and that's very unfortunate. Yeah. It's very interesting. So we're in this very sensitive, tender area, and I want to just ask you guys, again, relating back to the body, a lot of this experience or trauma it finds a place in the body, and actually those of you who know what the chakra system is about is that the first chakra is the base chakra between the perineum and the anal opening, and when we have this sense of not feeling grounded, there is this feeling of always gripping. And so if you're sitting here, you don't need to show it, but if you get this sense or awareness when you're in that state of anxiety of not having enough, even when there is enough, just do a little bit of a mental journey and say, am I holding there? Am I energetically holding myself? And most times you will find that there is this like pulling up of your energy, because until you feel that sense of security, and that's why you're here, to get a sense of, okay, I want to understand from the foundation up what actually is going on, and how can I have a sense of control and understanding and make it so that my values are in accordance with how I'm utilizing money. So it's just something to be aware of on a physical level. That sometimes is that sense of tensing, whether it's in the jaw or whether it's in the first chakra. It can be a very healing moment to just go in, take a few breaths and say, you know what, I am safe. Because where we are, circling back to the culture, at the end of the day, we are all relatively safe compared to where people are elsewhere in this world. We have roofs over our head, we have heat, we have water, we have food, and we have community, especially if you're in this community. So that primal sense of fear is just another one of the ego's overlay that relates back to what wasn't met when you were at that very young, tender age. Vulnerable. And thank God our ego steps in and creates these structures to protect us. But when you reach an age and a stage where you realize maybe, just maybe, I'm old enough now to have the back of my child, so that when I am, I'll use this woman, this client yesterday in an example, when she's in that place of, I deserve to go on that vacation, knowing that she's the primary breadwinner and taking time off would mean a real hardship or struggle to pay for. But she's like at this point, that teenage point where it's like, I don't care, I need this, I'm going to do it. There needs to be this almost shift or nurturing from the adult that says, you know what, I don't want to pay the price for you to have that initial gratification, which, let's face it, when we're young, it's all about impulse. We got to satisfy the impulse. And so you're absolutely right. It's beautiful what we were able to do to come to this stage being whole. But now I'm inviting all of you to integrate it so that the child feels that that you, the adult, has her back, which is the perfect time before we take the break to hand out these sheets. So after an initial session with a client, and we've gone into this area and explored it and tried to pick up the thread and what's happening in today's relationship on the emotional, spiritual realm, I give an exercise, a homework exercise. That in and of itself is an interesting dance, because sometimes people come back and they say, I didn't get to the homework. I just wasn't. It's tough. It's tough. I'm asking you to show up with your inner child, and you'll read the exercise and take it home with you. Here's what it's about. I want you to imagine yourself sitting across the table, having tea or just hanging out with yourself at that age where there's the charge. What were you wearing? What were you sitting like? Anything that you can do to embody what that energy is will be helpful in this exercise, because what you're going to do is you're going to ask your inner child questions to create that dialogue, to create that open channel here. And depending on the age, except for the teenage, because I told her I would ask different questions, put down different questions for her, but this is really for a child that's young, upwards of like 10 or 12. You want to start out slowly. So the questions are simply, what's your favorite flavor ice cream? What's your favorite what's your favorite color? And then they go a little bit deeper to, what makes you giddy? What makes you frightened? What kind of people are you most comfortable around? You don't have to write these down because I'm handing these out. But what kind of situations make you shrink away or want to crawl under the covers and never come out? But you don't answer the questions. You walk away. You even give yourself a couple of days. Because when you do pick up the pen to answer these questions, you pick it up in the non-dominant hand. What's fascinating is that the brain doesn't have a chance to do its normal ego thing, or the critical judge can't step in and say, oh God, this is so ridiculous. You're totally switching the brain waves. And yes, you're going to be writing as if you're 5, 6, 10. But you're allowing yourself access to those really deep, older held feelings about what life is like for you in this present day. Because she's with you, or he's still alive with you. Clients come back after doing this exercise and they say to me, it's like they crawl up onto my shoulder and then they're navigating the world around us. They report back that when they're going to make an impulse decision, or if they're engaged in a conversation with their child, it's like you feel your child wanting to, you, the child, react to I have a teenage daughter who's 18, and it's just really fascinating because as soon as you begin to hear that inner voice, then you, the adult, can step in and say, no, we don't need to spend $2,000 on that pocketbook. That's not going to make us feel better. Or maybe we don't need to be having dinner out 3 times a week because I just feel like I'm way too tired to cook. I mean, whatever that child is feeling, you can kind of really begin to work with that so that when you look at where is money going to actually express what your life values are, you can then begin to curate that. And I'm going to talk more about that after we have a break. So recognize and acknowledge I mean, you guys, again, are Waldorf parents. What do children want? They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be validated. That's exactly what you're going to do with this inner child exercise. What is it that you are experiencing in this world, in this day-to-day world that's triggering you? And what are you depriving yourself of? Like when my inner child comes out, my family makes fun of me. I flap my hands like this because I get excited. I mean, I guess I did it when I was little, but I know that I'm like in total, I can feel it when I do something like that. So if you're not getting enough of these feelings during your day-to-day life, then you got to ask yourself, well, wait a second. Is that the kind of life that I want to be living? Or is that the kind of life I want to be modeling for my children? That's a tough one. Because that last question, it may not be the last question on this one, but if you only had X number of days, hours, months left on this in this one precious life, what would you be doing? And can you integrate a taste of that into your present life now? Because I don't have to go around the room and ask how many of you have heard a story, had a relative or a friend that all of a sudden their life changed drastically because of a health challenge. Okay? Is Jen coming back?
Yeah.
I mean, like, did you find her?
She wasn't out there.
Bummer. Okay, I have to move forward. Okay, so when I work with people after we acknowledge that there has to be a space in your life and in the work that you do with me one-on-one for that inner child's needs and fears and wants and longings, we then have to take it into how are you interacting with money on a day-to-day basis. So the first part has to do with inflow versus outflow. It's that simple. You need to be able to look at where money is flowing in. I touched on this before the break as far as, are you asking for what you deserve? Do you need to really take a cold, hard look and say to yourself, I haven't asked for a raise, or I'm not working to my full potential, or maybe I need to be contributing more to the, yay, you're back. Maybe I need to be contributing more to the pool of money that we are calling the family income, so that there's a sense of contribution, but also there's a sense of balance. And so when we take a look at where the inflow is, we take into consideration not only what salaries are or what you're earning from your own business, but passive forms of income, whether it's alimony, whether it's investment properties. You have to put all those together and come up with a number. And it has to be relatively consistent. So if your money, somebody said to me, how do we you had asked me, how do you deal with inconsistencies? You got to take an average of at least this last 6 months, or however inconsistent your earnings are, get an average, because you need to know what your outgoing obligations are, so that you're not living, which is what human nature is. Whee! I just got a $50,000 commission check. Let's go on vacation. Whereas my husband, I do love him dearly, will say, come on, we just got this money. And then I'm thinking to myself, it's already paid for. I mean, that's already allocated.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. He still has hard time with that one. So when we talk about inflowing versus outflowing, we're distinguishing between fixed versus discretionary. Now, I know this sounds very basic, but I really want to bring it down to its simplest form, because if it's at its simplest form, there will be less resistance from your inner child who's going to say, I don't want to do that. But the idea here is that when you know what's coming in, and you know what the required monthly expenses are, you're going to know what your nut is. And anything that you have over and above that left over is discretionary income, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you need to be able to cover your fixed monthly expenses. And why? Because when I was a financial planner, one of the foundational blocks, building blocks, is you need to have an emergency fund. You need to have anywhere between 3 and 6 months of those mandatory fixed expenses set aside in an account. Not being invested, not illiquid, in a savings or a money market account. Okay. Assume for the moment that you are not living in the red, and there is discretionary money each month being left over. Where does it go? Well, in order for your inner child to be on board with all of the things that we're going to be talking about, you need to let him or her know that there's something in it for them. They're not going to participate. It's like going on a diet. I mean, who sticks on a diet if they feel like it's not worth it? The idea here is that you need to be able to hear what your inner voice is saying that you need to feel fulfilled, to feel as though it's worthwhile maybe curating and monitoring your spending in certain areas of your life that have been used as a way to make it easier. Or if you're not happy in an area of your life, to, well, I like to get my nails done. Or I like to drink fine wine. Or I like to drive a new car every 2 years. Whatever it is that you've been doing because you're not in a healthy or happy situation, you need to be able to know that there's money that's going to be allocated for those kinds of rewards, if you will. One simple way that I tell people to do that is and you're all parents, so I'm going to share with you that when my kids were very young and I was really trying to figure this out and also work with my inner child, I came up with a concept called the mad money jar. You know, when you're getting ready to go out for an event or you're going out to dinner and you know you're going to pay the babysitter X and you know the cost of dinner or in a movie or X is Y, and then all of a sudden right before you're getting ready to leave the child gets sick. You have to cancel the babysitter. You know you're not going out for dinner. How much was that? How much money were you prepared psychologically to spend that all of a sudden now, if you don't do anything with it, is just sitting there absorbed into the account? 100 in this day and age? 150? If you pull that money out because you were already committed to doing it, and you put it, and I'm talking dollars now, I know most people don't work with dollars anymore, put it into a mad money jar, your inner child gets excited. Because when it starts to increase in value up to about $1,000, wow, I'm getting close to what I really want to give myself. And it's not that erratic, what did I call it? Impulsive. I need it now, I want it now, forget what. You're literally taking money, you go to, for example, you need new tires, and Sears or wherever you buy your tires is having a sale. So instead of it being $950, it's $650. Yes, I'm suggesting that you pull that money out of the account and put it aside into this mad money fund because you know you needed the tires. It's not like you were being financially irresponsible. Okay. So it is important for us to always have in mind that if you're not going to take care of her or him, then I've had people say to me, I pulled all my money out of my 401k. I liquidated my retirement account. I took out a credit card and I now have X number of dollars at whatever interest because I needed to do something just to take care of myself. And believe me, there's no judgment here. It's just a way to have him or her see that you're trying to take care of her needs or his needs as well. So now let's talk about what about mindful investing? When you realize that you want to save for the short and or long term. How do we do that? We're living in such a volatile time, politically, as well as the stock market. I mean, historically speaking, there have been market corrections every decade. The last market correction came in March of 2009. We're getting awfully close, and they occur every 8 to 10 years. So we're getting extremely close to another correction. And if you look at what happened last week, if you don't look, that's fine too, because who has the stomach for it? But I mean, I think the market dropped 800 points in one day, 300, 600. I mean, the gyrations are enormous. And no one can tell you whether or not that was all that was going to occur, how long it's going to last. So there's something that's very real happening. And when I was giving workshops a year ago, I was telling people about this. And here we are a year out, and it's still something that hasn't actually completely taken hold yet. So how do you put your hard-earned money? Some of you said you want your money to work as hard as you do. How do you invest knowing that there's a potential for you to lose your principal? So there are two basic characteristics of investments. You're either in an income or interest-producing investment, or you're in a growth-oriented investment. Doesn't get much more complicated than that. So let's break it down. An income-producing investment is like a savings account, a savings bond. Anything that's generating interest and or income, a certificate of deposit, a treasury bill, a treasury note, you get the picture. And in some instances, it also can be real estate, because real estate can throw off an income. But in many instances, people are not in a position to take the time or have the money to be able to manage real estate. So we'll just set real estate in that category, but I'm really focusing more on interest and income producing investments. Why would people be interested in putting their money there? It's safe and it's secure. During what I just described as volatile times, there is no potential loss of principal.
What if the real estate value goes down?
That's why I don't like to really throw real estate in there. I'm going to talk about that when we're talking about growth. We'll talk about that because that's the fluctuation. But I mean, if you own a rental property and it's throwing off income, all things being equal, that's the income side. Okay. Interest and income is taxable. And depending on what your tax bracket is, it can really have an effect on what your rate of return is. Now, I'm going to share with you that I graduated from college in 1983, and I was so green then. Interest rates, are you ready? Were between 11 and 14%. So I just thought that that was the going rate that you could get in a money market account. And why is that significant? There's something called the rule of 72. Really important concept, very important to hold on to. If you want to know how quickly a lump sum of money will double, you divide the interest rate you're getting on your money, let's use 11, into this magic number 72, and that's about what, 6.5? If you have your money invested in an account paying you 11%, your money will double in 6.5 years. Not bad, huh? But let's take a look at what the banks are offering us. 1.5? Okay, 1.5. So wait a second. Let's make it simple for Joanne, since I'm not really somebody who thinks quickly with math on my head, surprisingly enough. 2%. Let's say we can get 2% on our money. 2 goes into 72, 36 years. Who has 36 years to wait until their money doubles? I don't. Let's spend a moment here though, because when I asked before, when we first started, does anybody know what rate of interest you're paying on your credit card debt?
18, 25,
0% until I can move it to the next credit card after.
You are unique.
Move it and move it.
Okay, you are unique, because most people come to me and oftentimes I'll hear, oh no, I'm good, I'm making the minimum payment. And then part of the homework is, could you please go back and check what the interest is on the bottom of the page? And they come back and they're like blanched because it's 22%. the banks are doubling their money every 3.5 years. So of course they want you to take out more debt. And that's where I go into the schools and I explain to teenagers, you can't consider that money your own. So yes, you can use, and that's one of the first instructions I'll tell people when they say, help, I can't seem to get out of debt. You need to zero out the interest so that all the money you're paying is in principal. I'm going to take one more moment and say that if any of you are dealing with student loans and the interest rates now are eking up over 7%, there is a little loophole that I would like to share. Oftentimes people would say to me, well, I'm making my payments, but I can't really, take a notch out of the principal. There's a little bit of a loophole here that if you go back in 3 or 4 days later and you make a second payment, you direct where the money goes. That's pretty significant to know that, because then you can really make a difference on your student loans. So that's an income or interest producing investment. Just to recap, it only creates interest, which is more than likely taxable. It's guaranteed principal, so you don't have to worry about risk. On the other hand, what kind of rate of return is 2% when inflation has been running at 2%? You're basically at zero, except if you were back in the 80s when I was first coming out. The good, yeah, I had fun. Okay, so now we're going to switch it over to growth-oriented investments. What constitutes growth? Any investment that you make, whether it's in an individual stock or mutual fund or ETF that's investing in the economy. There are 11 sectors in our market. Healthcare, financial, technology, across the board. That's not a sector, but yes, that is an up-and-coming area. And real estate. Because again, when you buy a piece of real estate, your expectation is that the value is going to appreciate over time. What is the negative side of a growth investment? Well, like you said, volatility. You have no guarantee how things are going to perform. I want to talk about how do you mitigate risk, because if your choice is to stay stuck and someone said, I'm tired of keeping my money safe, because really, it isn't safe. If a cup of coffee 3 years ago was $2.75 and with inflation it's now at $3.25 and you've got your money sitting in a bank or in a CD, you're losing money. You can't keep pace with the cost, which harkens back to why it's so important to do that piece around self-worth. Are you asking for what your worth is? Can you go out and put on that coat and say, I know I'm worthy of more. What would that look like? Okay? So, on the growth side, barring the idea of investing in individual stocks for the moment because of the extreme volatility, how do you mitigate risk? Number one, through a broadly diversified portfolio, meaning if you are going to participate in the US and or international economy, you try and pick investments that are investing across all sectors of the market. Because if the bottom falls out on tech again, and you're in the other 10 sectors of the market, you're going to feel it, it's going to pinch, but it's not going to ruin you. What does that look like? It looks like you're investing in something like an index fund or an index ETF. How many of you are familiar with that concept? Right, okay, because you're investing across all the different sectors of the market and you're reducing your risk that way. Since I don't sell products, if you ask me which ones would I recommend, there are companies like Vanguard, T. Rowe Price, Fidelity, Schwab. All of them now offer what's referred to as a generic 500 index. There are a few, such as Vanguard, that offer, and I would think in this community that will be very much appreciated, a social index, meaning they screen out all the companies that are not in alignment with what you believe are significant. Hold on. Can we hold your questions until a little later?
If you know about green century funds and if you know if that's a good thing.
I'm going to talk about the different funds. So The reason why I mention the Vanguard is having to do with cost. But I'm not at the cost part of my presentation yet. I'm at the risk part, so I will address that in a moment. So the first way to reduce risk is through great diversification. The second way to reduce risk is to invest your money on a systematic basis, meaning that instead of trying to time the market, when you hear you're at a cocktail party and you hear, God, I'm doing so well in the market, chances are if you enter the market at that point, it's at a high point, guys, and it's only going to be coming down quickly. Conversely, if the market isn't performing well, that's even though human nature is not to want to buy into something that's not doing well, you're going to see a better return over time. But who the heck can time it correctly? So, there's a concept I'd like to share with you called dollar cost averaging, which simply means that the investor, it's been proven over time, who invests on a systematic basis, preferably monthly, if you invest on a regular basis, you will outperform the investor who's trying to time the market. Investor number one on January 1st, the share price is $100 a share, is able to buy 12 shares and goes into the market and has a broad-based portfolio and feels very confident that things are going to go well. Investor number two was at my talk and says, all right, well, no, I think I'm going to spread it out every month for the next 12 months, I'll invest $100. So, January 1 comes around, that investor goes into the market, the share price is $100 a share. She can buy one share. In February, the share price takes a dip to $50 a share. Investor number one's portfolio is no longer worth $1,200. He's not panicking, or she's not. I'm trying to be sexually neutral here.
Just say
She. Thank you. So her portfolio is now dropped down to $600. Investor number two takes their $100 investment and for $50 a share buys 2 shares. Now we see the market have a serious correction so that in March the share price drops to $1 a share. It's not going to happen. In the last market correction, the share prices drop. Investors usually saw between a 30 and 40% drop. So it does come back. But in this purposes of this explanation, in March, the share price drops to $1 a share. Investor number one's portfolio is now worth $12, and investor number two's portfolio, while she's bringing in that $100, gets 100 shares in the month of March. 1 share in January, 2 shares in February, 100 shares in March. So that when the market returns in April to $100 a share, investor number one goes, okay, I'm back where I started. Investor number two has 1, 2, 100, and 1. That's 104 shares at $100 a share. Do the math.
That's cool.
And she still has $800 sitting in the account that hasn't been invested. Now that's an extreme, but it is simply to illustrate that the market does have these cycles, and who can tell on a particular day, let alone an hour, when you're going to be making that purchase, especially if you automate it in your checking account. The idea here is that when you systematically make this investment, you're going to get the benefit of the up market because the value of your underlying portfolio is going to be high. And when the market starts to drop, your portfolio is, your investment is going to be able to buy more shares. Now, that's the second characteristic of reducing risk. The third characteristic of reducing risk is to know your time frame. I had another woman come in yesterday. She's 67 years old. She wants to retire. She has $275,000 in her 401k. And between the time she made the appointment with me and the time we met, her portfolio dropped 12 grand. So there we are sitting there, and I'm explaining all these different factors to her, and she's not in a very risky situation, but she wants to retire by March. So I said, I can't make a recommendation, but I will say that if you move this money into a money market account, which interestingly enough is getting 2%, and her fund within the last 30 days is getting negative 1.2%, it will stabilize you. So you need to know your time frame. Now for you guys, I don't see retirees in front of me, but if you have money set aside for in a 529, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, or in an educational fund, and you know you need it for that next semester, do you really want to keep it in the growth fund, even though it got you a 10% or 14% return last year? If you need it short term, you need to be aware that you need to go into the safe harbor, the income side. Yeah, you're giving up some of that growth potential, but you're giving up a lot of that risk potential too. Any questions on that?
I didn't realize, I signed up for a 529 and I haven't funded it partly because it was more important to fund other things first, but I didn't realize that I can use it for this school. I thought I'm saving for my son's college.
Okay, I can't talk about 529s because that's not the subject of my conversation, but that is a true statement.
Yeah, they changed the law.
They changed the law. We're not going to talk politics.
December 4th. We will talk about it.
Right.
Good.
Okay? So, those are the two different characteristics of investing discretionary income that you are able to find when all your bills are paid off. Yes? There will be a Q&A in a little while. Yeah, you'll hold on to it? How am I doing? Okay. If you're dealing with a situation where you have a large amount of debt, and oftentimes people will say to me, can I still invest? Well, let's do the numbers. If you're in 0% financing land and you are well within paying off that debt within that allocated period of time, or you know how to do the flip, 0% financing flip, which by the way, I don't know how long they're going to continue to offer that if interest rates go up, so just be mindful of that. Then you have to ask yourself, what is the rate I'm paying on my debt versus what is the potential rate of return I can get in my growth-oriented investments? And if they don't balance out, in other words, if you're paying a higher amount of debt, for example, on student loans, than what you can expect to make over time in your investments, pay off your debt. Pay off your debt. I mean, that's really going to make the most difference. Again, to just touch in what the first half of my presentation was about, it really has a lot to do with what your values are. What's your day-to-day life like? If your day-to-day life feels very stressful because you're having to live at a certain level of consumption and paying for all these different kinds of luxuries, and this is not a judgment, but it's taking its toll on your health and well-being and quality of time with family, then you have to ask yourself, how do I negotiate that kind of debt, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next decade or more? So the growth part of your portfolio has to occur when you've created a lifestyle that you can live within, so that all that hard work that you're doing can start to work as hard for you. And then hopefully double every 8 or 9 years. Because I mean, a good index fund, I'm going to be conservative, but over a 25, 30-year period of time will give you a rate of return between 5 and 8%. Yeah, in one particular year it might be 17%. In another year it might be 4%, but overall between 5 and 8%. So at that rate, you're looking at doubling your money every 8 to 12 years. So I do want to touch upon, because I think I have a few moments, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes and then I'll answer questions. I want to talk about retirement planning, because I think that that's important, and that's not part of the next presentation. If any of you are in a retirement plan where there is matching, it behooves you to go and fund it to the max. Think about that. If you have an employer who's matching at 3%, that's basically giving you a 3% bonus on your rate of return each year. Not to mention the fact that when you put money away for retirement, you're not paying current income tax or state tax. So if you put $5,000 away, and I know you can put away $5,500, but then it gets complicated for me with the arithmetic, so we're going to just use 5. And you're in the, you got to admit what your limitations are, especially standing in front of a group. And let's say you're in the combined federal and state tax bracket of 30-ish%. That means that $5,000 that you're able to put away for retirement, 1/3 of that, Uncle Sam is footing the bill. What do I mean? Well, that $1,500 in tax savings, because you've put it into that retirement plan, would have otherwise gone to the IRS in New York State. So to me,
That's a 501c3.
nope, that's a regular, good old IRA.
Okay. I feel like my IRA hasn't changed at all since I put it away 12 years ago.
Okay, so let me address that. If your IRA is in a vehicle that is not as I just described, it could be in an income-oriented, conservative fund, and it's not going to grow. It's not really going to grow. Which reminds me, I didn't address one other area that I think is so important. You know, before this president took office, President Obama was trying to pass the fiduciary responsibility rules. Anyone aware of what that is? I am like on a one-woman crusade to try and get people to understand what he was trying to do, because essentially billions of dollars are being taken away from people who have pension plans and investments because they don't understand the cost to be an investor. Let me explain what I mean. Depending on what fund you took your IRA out through, there's something called a sales charge. That's the upfront charge. When I was living in the city, you know, you'd go to a club, you'd pay a cover charge. Think of it in those terms. Sometimes a fund will charge anywhere between 3 and 8%.
Wow.
So if you invest 1,000, 8% of 1,000 is $80. That comes right off the top. It's called the sales charge or front-end load. But it's not just that. Once you're the investor, your money is being managed. And there's something referred to as an expense ratio. It's the cost to pay for the lights, the desks, whatever. With a company like Vanguard or Fidelity or T. Rowe Price, the expense ratio is very, very low. It can be as low as 1/10 of 1%. With some of these other funds, it can be as high, and I just saw this yesterday, as 2.1 or 3%. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but think about it. The whole idea of a retirement fund is that you start out here and it grows to here. So 2% of 10,000 is a lot less than 2% of 300,000. And it's every year. Every year the expense ratio comes out. So to answer, coming back to what you said, you could be in the wrong type of investment for someone your age, especially if your horizon is longer than 5 or 10 or 20 years. But you really need to look at what was the cost that I didn't get told, and that's what Obama's point was. Brokers need to say up front, this is what I make for you going into this account, this is this is the cost of being an investor. Billions, people, billions of dollars are being taken away from you that you don't even realize. And so between what's going on in the inner workings of your investment versus the return that you're getting if it's not the right kind of growth-oriented investment, yeah, you could probably not be seeing much return. And if you do it through a bank, God help you, because they put you in those automatic renewals. And if you don't call up and say, I don't want to be in a CD at 1.5%. Wait, what is it now? 1.25? I don't want. They're going to keep rolling it over and rolling it over. So that doesn't take away from the fact that when you go into a retirement account, whatever the contribution level you have is, those dollars are being captured and invested in a tax-deferred way so you don't have to pay current taxation and you avoid the tax up front. Now, with very young people, they also have the added incentive, and I consider you guys quite young, to have a Roth IRA where you don't get the tax break up front, but all that growth, you'll never have to pay a single penny of tax on that money.
But you're penalized if you move the IRA to a different IRA holder? Are you penalized if you move your IRA to a stock situation, an investment in stock?
Okay, the answer is this. I have to break that question down. Did everybody hear that? If you're in an IRA and you pull money out of an IRA before 59.5, there's a 10% penalty tax and you pay ordinary income tax. It's like, okay, you want that money now? You got to pay ordinary income tax.
Transfer it straight to another.
If you go from one IRA to a rollover IRA, within that 60-day period of time, and you can go from institution to institution, there is no, can you believe I'm the same woman that was here like an hour and a half ago? Okay, talk about dichotomy. There's no taxable event if it's within a 60-day period of time. And because it's under the umbrella of a retirement account, any exchanges inside that IRA, whether it's to stocks or any other investments, will not be a taxable event.